Тому фінал цієї історії
How we see, in my opinion, the victory, the future victory of Ukraine.
– це повна перемога України.
First of all, the complete military victory of Ukraine.
That was the voice of Viktor Yushchenko, former president of Ukraine who served from January 2005 to February 2010, when he lost a presidential election to Viktor Yanukovych. Yanukovych, in turn, was driven from the presidency in a coup d'etat funded and directed by the U.S. government. Yushchenko was speaking in front of the U.S. Capitol last month at a press conference announcing the introduction in the House and Senate of the Victory in Ukraine resolution. The press conference was organized by a group that includes 10 members of the House, 9 members of the Senate, and officials from the Department of State, Defense, and Commerce, known as the Helsinki Commission. The bill states that it is the policy of the United States to see Ukraine victorious in the war with Russia, that peace brought about by this victory must result with the integration of Ukraine into NATO. It also declares that the U.S., with its allies, will secure reparations from Russia and see that there is justice for what it calls Russian war crimes and accountability for those from the Russian leadership. This past Sunday, I questioned one of the bill's co-sponsors, Representative Mike Lawler, about its meaning. He's a Republican from New York's 17th Congressional District, and for full disclosure, I reside in his district.
Isn't it a declaration of war on Russia with the policy that you want to return Crimea, get war crimes charged against the government of Russia, and reparations? Isn't that a declaration of war? Now, how are you going to enforce it without war? How do you intend to enforce it without war?
You guys want to leave.
That sound was recorded on a cell phone in a very crowded room, as you could hear, by activist and journalist Jose Vega. But the former Ukrainian President Yushchenko was not at all shy about explaining the meaning of the victory that the bill promises.
Пункт, який не обговорюється.
And this is not something that we even discuss.
Відновлення повного політичного суверенітету над кожним квадратним сантиметром української суверенної землі.
It means to restore every single centimeter of our territory, completely restore our political sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Після чого можуть виходити на порядок дня політичні перемовини.
And after that, only after that, we can start political negotiations
На умовах України.
on the conditions of Ukraine.
Пункт номер 2.
And number two, another important component of the victory.
На мій погляд, залишити Росію така, як вона сьогодні є, після перемоги України на своїх суверенних землях, це означає, що ми неправильно розуміли задачу.
And if we let Russia stay the way it is, if we let this authoritarian regime in Russia survive, it means that we fail to provide the second important component of our victory.
Перемога означає, що Росія ніколи не повинна нести загрози і дестабілізацію.
Victory of Ukraine also means that Russia never again becomes a source of threat, becomes a source of aggression for any other nation in the world.
Дай Бог, щоб там національні проявилися рухи, адже там проживає 190 корінних народів, про яких ми дуже часто забуваємо.
As you know, Russia is also home to almost 200 different nations who also thrive for their political independence.
Друге, якщо в першому ряду кримінального суду Гааги не буде сидіти Путін, Шойгу, опитний оленівод і вся та банда, людство ніколи не осудить злочин путінізму.
And the second thing is to make sure that Putin's regime, its crimes are condemned. That once we see all these Russian war criminals sitting on a court bench and politically and publicly condemned, including President Putin, his military leadership, and an experienced dear breeder, General Shoigu.
In summary, the U.S. Congress is entertaining a resolution that promises victory in Ukraine, which includes expelling Russia from its Black Sea naval base in Crimea, which was established by Russia in 1783, regime change in Russia, the dismantling of the Russian state into almost 200 separate nations, and that the Russian leadership face war crimes trials, and that includes the president and the chief defense official. To take a look at how this is being perceived in Russia, we spoke with Dmitry Babich. He's a journalist based in Moscow with the international section of the RIA Novosti media group. We spoke with him via Skype on Monday. So this is an interesting development in the Congress, and frankly, a frightening one to me. What's your perception of it?
Well, this is the problem with the modern West and with the ideology that it has. I mean, I'm ready to hear this objection that you are talking about the West. What do you mean by the West? By the West, I mean the people and the system of government which exists in the United States and in the European Union, and which is based on a certain radical ideology. I would call it radical liberalism or ultra-liberalism. You know, the ideals, the initial ideas are pretty lofty. Unfortunately, in the modern West, they push these ideals to such extremes that actually it becomes a totalitarian system, and it justifies, at least officially, at least in the media, the West justifies interfering and sometimes invading other countries by these very lofty ideals. And the problem with that system is that it becomes unable to seek compromise, to seek any kind of negotiated solution. Talking about the Russian history, I mean, we may have different views on the communist period of that history, but most of the people in Russia agree that the problem with that government was that in its heyday in the 30s, in the 20s, under Lenin and Stalin, this system just rejected compromise. It wanted a total victory for itself. And the same can be said about the modern West. And with this act on Ukrainian victory, correct me if I pronounced wrongly the name of this document, which they want to push through the Congress. The problem with that document is that it leaves no room for compromise. We heard Mr. Yushchenko, the former president of Ukraine, who became a complete failure. I mean, the person who tried to be re-elected and who got less than 5% of the vote. I mean, what would you say about the American president who runs second time in 4 years and who gets 5% of the vote? I think that person would have been called a failure, right?
Yes.
Basically, Viktor Yushchenko is saying, knowing that he is in the United States and that he would have total support for his ideas, he is basically pushing for a war without an end, because he says, we not only want all the territory back with all the Russian-speaking population there, we want Russia to change its regime, and we want the Russian officials whom we don't like, we want them all to be in jail. This is, besides being stupid, it's also not feasible. I mean, you cannot conduct a war if you have unrealistic aims. In the good old days, the United States used to understand it.
Yeah.
I remember how I talked to Eric Goldhagen, the American historian, pretty conservative, pretty opportunist, I would say. And we talked to him, we talked in the beginning of the Chechen War in 1994, 1995. And he said that whatever I think about Dudayev, the Chechen president, he is a criminal because he is waging a war he cannot win. And this was exactly true, Actually, in the end, the Islamists, mostly foreign Islamists, who started this war and who conducted it against Russia, they lost, And Chechnya became the opposite of what Mr. Dudayev wanted it to be. Right. And Eric Goldhagen was wise enough to say that whatever we think about his ideals, Mr. Dudayev, he is waging a war he cannot win.
Which means that all of the death and destruction is for naught, doesn't it?
Let the whole world explode, but let our political line prevail. This is their attitude.
Yeah, it's madness. Absolute madness. I really appreciate your time, Dmitry, and your wisdom, and hope to speak with you again real soon. And if we're lucky, we'll all still be here.
Good. I don't consider myself a very wise man, but thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.